Welcome to the Raleigh Board of Selectmen meeting for Monday, February 12th, 2018 at 7 p.m. at the Town Hall, 139 Main Street in Raleigh, Mass. First order of business is to call a meeting to order, and I will next ask everybody to stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Okay, we have public comment.
Read the top line.
Oh, yes. This meeting is being video and audio recorded and televised live on Raleigh Community Media. We will have, we'll attempt to have public comment from 7:05 to 7:10. We have a 7:15 appointment with Conservation Agent Brent Bazelak. We have a 7:30 appointment with Tamla Graves and Richard Burns. We have old business, new business, and we're getting started on fiscal 19 budgets. So let's go to old business. Old business number 1, update on the Pine Grove School project.
Are you going to do the public comment first?
7:05.
Oh.
The bidding is underway for the sub-trades. A walkthrough for the sub-trades was held last week. The bid deadline is February 27th, 2018. The Building Committee Working Group reviewed furniture samples. The working group will set up a display for the Pine Grove School teachers and staff to look at. The demolition and abatement contract was approved by the Building Committee. The Building Committee voted to recommend the Board of Selectmen approve the contract to SMS Services, Inc. in the amount of $1,061,300. If the Board of Selectmen is in agreement, they must vote to approve the contract and to authorize Chairman Perry to sign it. The next Building Committee meeting is scheduled for February 22nd, 2018.
I'll give you a motion, Mr. Chairman, to approve the contract for SMS services.
Second.
Motion has been made and seconded to approve the demolition and abatement contract to SMS Services, Inc. All those in favor say aye.
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 Mr. Chairman, you don't need to sign that, that's a duplicate. I have the 5 originals which can be signed later at another time.
Thank you. Old business number 2, update on the fire station, police station addition project. Construction fencing is being installed this week. The tree stumps are slated to be removed this week. We are working with National Grid on getting the gas main relocated and floodlights have been installed. David?
No, that covers it. Project's moving along. It's getting started finally. As long as the weather holds, we'll keep our fingers crossed that it's going.
Okay. I'll open up public comment for a total of 5 minutes. Please state your name
Kristen Herrick,
and your address.
43 Thurlow Street in Georgetown, but I'm representing Herrick Farm in Rowley. That's 77 Dodge Road.
Go ahead.
Do I stand?
You may.
Okay. I'm getting over a cough, so I hope I don't lose it. So my name's Kristen Herrick, and I grew up at Herrick Farm in Rowley, and I'm representing the next generation there. Our land has been in the family since Rowley's settlement as a sawmill and as a dairy farm today with 140 acres left. We also farm roughly 300 acres in Raleigh and surrounding towns. We've diversified every way we can for as long as I can remember, and continue to today. I'm here today, though, to talk about the Barnett Bradstreet Farm and how it affects the viability of our farm. From what I'm reading and conversations I've had with Michael Sabatini, it seems as though the town is trying to prevent this business from opening. I want you to understand the impact. Sorry, I lost my spot. I want you to understand the impact this has on other local farms. The Bradstreet Barn is a farm-to-table venue, which means a certain percent of the food product comes from the Bradstreet farm, and a certain percent food product comes from other local farms such as ours. It's become extremely difficult for farms to make a living. You can see that in the number of farms in town that have sold out to developers. There aren't many left. Agritourism provides a lifeline for farms, and the barn at Bradstreet Farm will benefit many local farms. I cannot think of a better advertisement for our farm than a farm-to-table venue that will feature our products, such as our grass-fed beef. Not to mention the tens of thousands of dollars worth of business Mr. Sabatini has already provided to my brother's sawmill for the restoration of his barn and the thousands he spends every year on hay for his animals. The town's actions in this matter have other farms in town and community members who value our farms and what they offer to everybody very concerned. I urge the selectmen to work cooperatively with Mr. Sabatini to allow this business to open and to preserve what is left of Rowley's farming heritage, which has all but disappeared in 40 short years. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else?
Hi,
Your name, please?
Phil Town, at 22 Bennett Hill Road. I'm really thrilled to have this seat this evening. This is the first time I've actually been able to sit in a real chair at one of these meetings, and I appreciate that. Which is one of the things I wanted to bring up, a couple of things for food for thought. I feel like a larger room would be a good thing, and encourage more people to participate in our town's democracy. I think we get some more involvement if they felt like everyone could always sit down. But I've felt, having small children and, a long day, that I show up at these things and sit on the floor, and I see people in the hallway, and, I hear people, through things like Rowley Talks grumbling about how they don't want to go to these things because there's never enough room to actually sit down and hear what's going on. Tonight, it's nice that there's a few seats available, but in all the times I've come, it's always been an overflow crowd. So I'm hoping that the selectmen will consider in the future to think about maybe using the room upstairs as a larger venue, and maybe if we build it, they'll come. Maybe we'll get even more involvement and get lots of fresh ideas into the process. The other thing that I wanted to bring up is the whole issue of solar farming in Rowley. I'm a big proponent of solar power or alternative energy, and I think that Rowley really needs to embrace solar energy, but I think that the project that's being proposed in a pristine environment, woods that would have to be chopped down, isn't the right place. There's so many places in Rowley that could be developed for solar, whether it's the top of Pine Grove School or this building itself, the library, all that commercial area, all those rooftops on Route 1, could all be great places that it doesn't end up being something that people would probably object to as much. And I also feel that we don't have a backup source of emergency energy in the event of a major disaster. Let's say the power grid fails like back in the 1960s and the whole East Coast goes out. If that happened now, we'd be in a very bad place. We would need to, at least be able to charge up a cell phone or a laptop, try to maintain some kind of intercity communication. I'd like for Rowley to embrace solar and alternative energy for the sake of the town and its people. And I hope that's something that in the future that the selectmen and the town of Rowley will consider. Thank you.
Okay. Public comment is over. And we will,
5 minutes and 25 seconds.
thank you. We will go on to old business number 3, discuss the fiscal year 19 Triton budget development and projected town assessment. Chairman Perry attended last week's Triton School Committee public hearing on the fiscal year 19 budget. He will update the board on this matter and discuss his thoughts on the agenda item. We went to a district communications meeting where we all get a chance to voice our opinions and they passed out the budget information sheet, and they had three scenarios. The number one scenario was an increase of $3,100,000 to the school budget to be shared by all three towns, and that would require no cuts to the Triton staff. They proposed a second one that required would take a $1.6 million cut and only assess the three towns, $1.4 million, which in Raleigh's assessment would be about $400,000. They had a third one because we were the only one of the three towns to send a letter to Triton saying that we would offer one half of our Prop 2.5 increase plus our new growth, which would add up to about $200,000. That would be scenario number 3. That would require a cut of 51 staff members. Scenario number 2, with the $1.6 million cut, would require laying off 36 staff. The school committee did not vote Wednesday night, but they did poll each member of the committee after the public hearing was over, after the last person spoke, and all members of the school committee there, I believe it was 8 out of the 9, all agreed that they would go after scenario number 1. Scenario number 1 means a $987,000 increase just to the town of Raleigh. Salisbury would get almost a $1.2 million increase for fiscal year 19, and Newbury would be getting, can I borrow you?
Sure.
Newbury would be getting an $888,029 increase this year. So we're very disappointed. Well, I was, and we will hear more on Wednesday night. There will be another budget vote. They will take their first vote. They will not come up with a final budget figure until the 15th of March. But I expect our increase in the Triton budget will be very high. Okay.
Mr. Chairman, I think it should be noted that scenario number 1 would be a 10.26% increase to the town of Raleigh.
Yes.
That's a big increase.
Very big, very big. It would wipe out our entire Prop 2.5 increase, plus our new growth, which again totals about $400,000, and all they're asking us to pay is $987,479. Bernie?
Yes, I'd like to just endorse Joe's summary of the meeting. I was there. A number of the Raleigh parents were there, so that's all good. But that's an accurate recounting of the way the meeting went. I'm very pessimistic that anybody is going to come up with any appreciable decrease in the requested budget, which is over $3 million. It's a hard problem. It's a very difficult problem, and I don't know that it can be solved in this 1 year. But I would kind of reinforce the fact that baked into the existing contracts is a similar, in terms of orders of magnitude, a similar increase for the following year. And obviously, we have to take care of the alligator closer to the boat, but there's another alligator and a pile of alligators coming right up behind. Any override, which is what they're asking for, will only take care of this coming year's additional excess, and we're faced with similar increases for the foreseeable future.
I would point out, too, that we are in agreement with the school committee that the budget problem stems from the lack of state funding. 15 years ago, we received $8,600,000 in state aid. 15 years later, we're getting $8.3 million, $300,000 less than what we got 15 years ago. State funding is not kept up to pace, and that's why we, as a town, are having a problem funding the school for their budget.
Bernie Cullen again, I don't disagree with that the state has contributed to the problem. I would point out, though, that in that intervening time, that the enrollment at the school has gone down by 1,000 students from around 2,700, from 3,500 down to 2,500, and the number of teachers, the number of staff, actual classroom teachers, has gone down by 5. So
Thank you.
there are other factors that are contributing to this situation that are actually within the control of the school committee.
Any other?
If that budget passed, okay, scenario number one, with $987,000 increase, then we would look at a decrease, I'm estimating, of about $700,000 in town services.
Correct.
So, and when we sit here and do the budget, you know, we have a $17 million budget. We really come down to this little piece over here. And this little piece over here runs the town on about $2 million. So we would have only $1.2 or $3 million to run the town. We'd have a $700,000 decrease. That's devastating to this town, devastating.
I would think it would be, definitely mean layoffs.
I don't know how we would function as a town. I really do not.
Any other? Okay. We have an update on the Annex Elevator Project. Debbie and Dave have been
Right.
working on the Annex Elevator.
Joe, you might want to do the appointment.
Oh, I'm
Do
sorry.
That might take a little bit of time.
Okay. I will go to my 7:15 appointment. We have a 7:15 appointment with Conservation Agent Brent Bazelak. Will be providing the board with an update on the town's compliance with the National Pollution Discharge Elimination System, NPDES, MS4 permit. One of the permit's requirements is to maintain an updated inventory of storm drains. The storm drains need to be monitored under NPDES. The Merrimack Valley Planning Commission has offered the town a proposal on creating and operating a mobile stormwater application. The selectmen would need to approve the proposal and sign the contract with MVPC in the amount of $2,000. Brent will then work with the town's IT department to purchase iPads for himself and the highway department. These funds are covered under the fiscal year 18 stormwater budget. Brent?
Thank you very much, Chairman Perry, distinguished members of the Board of Selectmen. I'm Brent Bazelak, I serve as your conservation agent and also function as the coordinator for municipal-wide, town-wide compliance with what was in the past known as Phase 2 of the Clean Water Act through the NPDES or MS4 program for municipal storm and sewer and drainage. Since Raleigh does not have sewerage, we really only have to worry about storm drainage. And as part of the effort to comply with the EPA's permit conditions and also demonstrate compliance with the Clean Water Act, which put this nation on a pathway towards addressing all waters of the U.S. that were impaired by whatever mechanism, be it contamination, pollution, or sedimentation, that an effort has always been made to reach, hopefully, the goal that all waters would be clean, swimmable, and drinkable. Now, that may never, ever happen in any of our lifetimes, but it's certainly a worthy goal to pursue. At this point in time, the town has met various permit requirements, and kind of the next step, if I may say so, is to utilize technology to help us do the inspections and then also go into the phase of monitoring, which is looking at what the stormwater systems where we do have them in some of our subdivisions and our roadway infrastructure, taking monitoring and sampling. So the first step, of course, is to inventory and know what you have, what you possess, and at that same time, also assess what its condition is, because it is an infrastructure, and like the rest of the nation, you've probably heard that some of our infrastructure is in need of some type of attention, and inventorying it and assessing it would be a step in that direction. And then, ultimately, it would then also move us into a program of where we actually monitor, sample some of the discharges coming out of our stormwater systems to assess whether they are having negative impacts on, say, the Great Marsh, on shell fisheries, on water quality in the Mill River, the Parker River, the Ipswich River. We have some of that watershed coming out of our community. Ultimately, this basically is being a good steward of the town's resources and focusing and paying attention to what we have in place, caring for it, because if we have knowledge of it, we can then assess its condition and determine where we need to devote resources in an appropriate manner. So I'm asking you to authorize the expenditure in entering into a contract with Merrimack Valley Planning Commission for the creation of a mobile app which can be used on tablets. It can also be used on iPhones also, but a tablet with a display is a much better presentation and allows better utilization. Right now, the town does have, through our MyMap program, we have some of the water distribution infrastructure is on there. The light department has a separate tab which has a representation of all of the electrical power infrastructure for the town. This is the phase of looking now at subsurface, subterranean, some of our drainage infrastructure, which can have a very pronounced impact both on when we go to upgrade roadways. It's really up to us as responsible stewardships of our community to look at the drainage infrastructures there, and also to pay attention to conditions such as flooding and other situations that some of our infrastructure, since it has a history of being in place for a long time, may potentially need to be upgraded. So that's why there's a request. This would be start off in combination with the Highway Department and the Conservation Department, who are out in the field and looking at that infrastructure. This would allow us to take a much more systematic and knowledgeable approach to categorizing it, inventorying it, and then also moving on to the program where we might do assessments and monitoring of what the actual quality of the discharges are. There is the potential that this application would not just be a one-trick pony for the Conservation Department and the Highway Department, that the Board of Health may have the capabilities of utilizing it for some of the aspects of their oversight of resources and public health in the town. But that's off in the future, and I'm just demonstrating that it has expandability and capabilities of being modified. Are there any specific questions I could answer for them?
Do you know approximately or specifically how many storm drains we do have?
I honestly don't. We have had different phases where we did some mapping. Some of that, when this program started off, they identified urbanized areas based on census blocks, and therefore there were significant portions of Raleigh that weren't included in that. And so when a mapping was initially, or inventory was initially done, it was done in kind of a very focused areas and not necessarily representative of looking town-wide. This will be directed specifically to become town-wide. As the same conversation I had with you when the town adopted its stormwater management and erosion control bylaw, that it didn't make a lot of sense to only look at certain portions of the town and ignore the conditions or the responsibility of trying to have good construction site practices in all portions of the town. And so it's kind of the same way. If we're going to start inventorying our drainage infrastructure and assessing it, inspecting it, and monitoring it, we're going to take an approach that starts figuring out where that is anywhere in town and trying to categorize it and basically responsibly look at it on a structured basis.
So what kinds of things are you monitoring for or assessing for?
Initially, it would be such things as E. coli or whatever, as a flag that might possibly indicate contamination, which may be resulting from non-functioning sewage disposal systems, septic systems that might be in the area that have contaminated the groundwater, because when your drainage system being down in the ground sometimes intercepts groundwater also. Early systems were not as tight, and as well as when they age, they sometimes also then start collecting groundwater and conduct it, so this would be focused on looking at how that infrastructure is behaving also. Some of these things, what they call dry weather sampling, leads you to identify where you've got sections where your piping joints might be loose and therefore are getting groundwater instead of just conducting the stormwater that you wish them to conduct. So this, again, helps, it helps looking at something, then gives you a better knowledge of how it's performing, whether it's functioning as designed, or whether it needs attention and needs to be upgraded, or needs some other type of assessment.
Brent, has there been any discussion regarding, I mean, a large portion of our town does not have street drains. Water runs directly off the streets into marshes or streams or other wetland areas. Are they, anybody talked about, you know, in the city, everything, 99% of everything goes into a storm drain. Community like ours, it's probably 20% maybe, I'm guessing. Are they monitoring, are they gonna be monitoring, in other words, and I'm not, I know it isn't happening now, but is it something we're gonna have to spend money for in the future to monitor those kinds of situations?
Yes and no, and yes and no. Let me kind of answer that with a little different direction, and that is where you have street infrastructure without drainage infrastructure, and you have stream crossings or river crossings or stuff like that. You are intuitively you're directed to go take a look at those areas and see if there are steps that you can take. And actually, we did this when we utilized the catastrophe of Dodge Road, Weathersfield Street at the Mill River Crossing, and Weathersfield Street at the Batchelder Brook Crossing. When we had the opportunity, we had to repair that damaged infrastructure from the Mother's Day's flood. We worked into the design components as that was being permitted to make steps in how we handled the stormwater coming up to those approaches to try and divert it and get it off of the street and not drop it directly into those streams and river crossings. So there's always the opportunity to look at that, and that's a normal process that this permitting actually encourages you to do. But in this sense, it's looking at the infrastructure that you already have intercepting stormwater and seeing what condition it's in, how it's performing, since you've got specific output or discharges coming from it, you can sample those and then see if there's any indications that there's attention that needs to be focused in that area. But in the longer term, yes, holistically you are supposed to also think about those situations and possibly work into your roadway repair projects, whether there's some of those crossings that you might have an opportunity to disconnect the direct discharge of stormwater right into a water course.
Very good, thank you.
Thank you.
I'll make a motion, Mr. Chairman, to
Second.
approve the $2,000. for the,
Motion has been made and seconded to sign the contract with MVPC in the amount of $2,000.
May I?
Yes.
Clarify, interrupt for just a second? There is the need to acquire the hardware, the iPads, to do this, so the amount of funding is potentially going to be, in this initial request, is potentially going to be $3,500 as a rough guess.
That includes the iPads and the...
Yes, the iPads and then the $2,000
All
contract.
right, I'll amend my motion to up to $3,000. 3,000.
Mr. Chairman, and just to clarify, the iPads are gonna be purchased by the town through our budget, through the budget with the IT department. It's not part of the MVPC contract that we need
All right, so
authorization.
2,000 will be the MVPC.
Just the contract
Yeah,
with
okay.
the MVPC.
I'll leave my motion as it is.
Okay. And Cliff, you second that.
Joe, this question.
Question?
Yeah, may I ask a related question? Bonnie Berkowitz, Weathersfield Street. Who owns the data that's collected? So this is data which seems as though it's essential and very helpful for the town to have, but who actually has access to that data? And let's say we do identify some areas that need to be repaired or addressed, and perhaps the town needs to put something out for bid. Would you be able to have the opportunity to monetize, obviously, the cost for, having access to the app? And then, of course, there's going to be additional cost to update the app on some sort of regular basis. I don't know what that might be. But there might be an opportunity for the data that's collected, and also, is there additional data? Generally, apps collect not just what you're seeing for data, but there's also backdoor bundles of information that's collected. And will that be proprietary for Rowley? Is that something shared amongst that group? And if we want to share it amongst a group, will we have access to it anytime and every time we want? And are we limited in any way of using that, or perhaps selling that to contractors or bidders, perhaps that might address those issues that could come up? Thank you. Sorry, but there's an opportunity there, I think.
Well, I think, the information belongs to the town. So I assume if someone wants access to it, they can contact the Conservation Commission
But-
and work through Brent to get the information. I don't think it's gonna be something that you can go, at least at this point, on the internet, for instance, and tap into that database. That's not gonna be, at least at this point in time. It's a closed database, right, Brent, pretty much at this point?
I really have to defer. I believe the Board of Assessors oversees the maintenance of the MyMap program, and so this is envisioned as being one aspect of the MyMap program, where our water distribution infrastructure and stuff is, and I believe it's a municipal system. Now, the data we're collecting in regards to commentary about the app doing other things, the app, as far as I know, is not going to do anything else than what we tell it to do, because it's going to have fields where we are going to enter information into, such mundane things as whether the catch basin has an iron grate on it or some other type of grate, or whether it's, the vertical bars or a grid, whether the manhole is constructed out of bricks or whether it's precast. I mean, this is, it's distinguishing characteristics of built infrastructure. Yes, latitude and longitude in terms of its location in town, but I haven't really thought of some of those things, but it's certainly not going to be put in broadcast just as the rest of our MyMap system. I don't know, but that's
Well,
already.
In other words, the prime purpose of this is to provide us to conform with the stormwater management that's dictated by the federal government and the DEP, right? I mean, that's what we're fulfilling,
Yes.
that obligation. That's the
Right.
primary purpose at this point.
Inventorying your infrastructure
Right.
is, though, I mean, it's just like a street listing in a sense, except it's a different piece of our, specific pieces of our infrastructure.
If I could just read from Section 8 of the contract, the ownership of the project documents. All reports, maps, databases, and other materials produced by the commission through this agreement will become the property of the town and the commission. That's the Merrimack Valley Planning Commission. The commission agrees that any requests for distribution of the data must be accompanied by written consent from the Town of Rowley, Department of Public Works, and the Conservation Commission.
Several years.
That's part of the agreement.
Just to add, Mr. Chairman, several years ago, we did something with the Merrimack Valley Planning Commission.
I
They actually started some of this, they did one component of this mapping, of
Yes,
the location.
and the location of gates, water gates, and
Well, no, in this case, it was catch basins.
Catch basins.
And known outlets to where those catch basins discharge to.
but I'm saying we did something with the water department and where the gates were,
Yep,
and which was
Yes.
crucial to the town. And I think when something like that, a crucial infrastructure, that particular thing would be come under Homeland Security. So you wouldn't be able, that proprietary information, you wouldn't want that out in the public domain.
right, well, that, there,
Yep.
again, we have that specific section that is our water distribution
Right.
system on what we call the MyMap program, which is not, is
And when it comes to
municipally
catch
closed.
basin, I'm not really sure, but I would be concerned about that too.
Well, and just to give you a pragmatic implementation of this, so we have mosquito control
Yes.
through the Board of Health.
Mhm.
And they're larviciding of catch basins
Mhm.
that, so this is going to contribute to allowing that and giving us the ability to check in with Northeast Mosquito Control District that in fact they have larvicided all the catch basins that we have. I mean, there's various cross-compatibility or cross-support of other health and environmental initiatives that this will help facilitate.
Okay,
We have a motion in a second. Further discussion?
yeah, we did.
And again, David, it was for the amount of $2,000 to approve the contract with the MVPC.
Right.
All those in favor say aye.
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 Abstain, I'm the representative for the Merrimack Valley Planning Commission.
Thank you.
Thanks, Mike.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
May I be of further assistance to the Board of Selectmen?
We're good.
Think you're all set.
Thank you, Brent.
If, there's a couple of poor chairs probably underneath your seat over there, sir, you could set up a couple of chairs over here. There's a couple of seats in the middle. I don't know how many people we got out there.
We have one seat up the back there, or is it two? One seat up. We have one seat down front here, one seat up the back.
One seat over here.
Good night, Brent. Thank you.
Yeah, bring that
Good night,
chair right
Brent.
up.
We do have, yes, we have a sign-up sheet. Please make sure that you sign. And if you do do want a chance to speak, that if you give your name and address so that we can have it recorded for the, by the Raleigh Community Media. And I will repeat my earlier announcement. This meeting is being video and audio recorded and televised live on Raleigh Community Media. I would like to give as many people a chance to speak, but I would like to be considerate of all of us here in that if somebody's already made your
one
point,
more seat over
please
here.
don't get up to repeat it. All right? So we have a 7:30 appointment with Tamala Graves
We have one
and
more
Richard
seat
Burns to discuss proposed solar farm at 623 Weathersfield Street. Ms. Graves and Mr. Burns have requested to meet with the Board of Selectmen to discuss a solar farm at 623 Weathersfield Street, which is currently under review by the Planning Board. Ms. Graves?
Mr. Chairman, as a member of the Light Department and also a selectman, I recuse myself from the going on here.
Thank you. Ms. Graves?
Yeah.
Okay. And Mr. Burns?
Mr. Chairman, I'm also a member of the Light Board, so I don't know what's going to be discussed here tonight. If it's going to be electrical matter or if it's going to be zoning.
Okay,
So if it's zoning, I will stay, but if it's electrical, I will not.
okay.
Okay?
Well, now that we're making our disclosures, I'm also a member of the Planning Board, and for that reason, I will not discuss anything specific about the pending application. But I think I can discuss, if the issue is general zoning issues, I think I can discuss that. But I'm not going to address the specifics of the application.
Ms. Graves?
Yes, I'm Tammy Graves of 624 Weathersfield Street. And I just want to start out by saying I wrote this down because, as several of you are aware, anytime I try to speak, I get very emotional, and I do apologize in advance if that happens. One thing that I noticed when I walked into the town hall tonight was I looked at all the pictures of the town and the beauty of the town and what I consider Raleigh. In those pictures, I did not see massive solar farms, large-scale facilities, especially around homes. That, to me, is the definition of what Raleigh is when you look at these pictures. When you listen to the neighbors, that, to me, is the definition of what Raleigh is. That is the reason that I moved here to Raleigh 20 years ago, was to live in an environment where I felt an old hometown feeling, where I felt like I could walk outside of my home, see the beauty and the nature that surrounds me. Not to walk outside of my home and be faced with looking at a large-scale solar ground facility that will be placed directly across the street from my home. Never in my life did I ever envision that that would be part of my life. That being said, my home at Weathersfield Street is very dear to me. I put my heart and soul into that home. It's my home. It has value not only financially to me, but it has value in my heart, which to me is just as significant as financial. No one can ever imagine how myself and all the other abutters of this facility feel, and I appreciate that, because if it doesn't affect you directly, it's hard to envision it. But when it affects you directly, it's awful. To think that something that I have worked for almost 20 years of my life and paid for is going to depreciate in value approximately 40%, and those numbers are quotes from real estate agents that several of us as homeowners have contacted in regards to this. And if anybody can imagine your home being depreciated by 40%, I mean, wow, that's amazing. That's my life. That's my home. So with that being said, the reason I'm here is to speak on the behalf of myself, my neighbors, abutters of this proposed large-scale facility to be located at 624 Weathersfield Street. I guess when I started writing this letter, I said to my husband, what do I say in this letter? And he said, well, what do you want to say in this letter? And I said, I want to say help. I want to say help because I don't know what else to say. I want to say, somebody help me save my home, save my neighborhood, my neighbors' homes. So I know that seems simple, help, but that's kind of why I'm here. I'm here to seek assistance from the town, from the Board of Selectmen, because I guess I feel like I'm not receiving any respect from the applicant. You know, I'm here to try to protect my home and everyone else's home that's surrounding this area. I'm here to protect the value of my home and my neighborhood. I'm also here to try to protect the proposed, 7 to 8 acres of land, tree removal, tree topping, land stripping that is going to happen in this area, the very undisturbed area. Myself and others are very scared, as I said, for our financial lives. We're scared for our homes and for the safety of our homes. I know that many people say, well, how do you feel unsafe with this? How does your home feel unsafe? We have learned by attending conservation meetings, the planning board meetings, researching things ourselves, we have learned that there's so much that exists in nature that we take for granted that we don't realize. That pine trees live as families, that they support each other, that other trees live that way. When you remove a whole massive group of those, it affects all the other trees around you. It affects all of our homes. My home is surrounded by pine trees that are so tall, I can't even tell you how tall they are. And I worry about the safety of what happens when a big storm comes, what happens when a big wind comes, and those trees no longer have that other group of family that they're so used to having. And here they are, and then all of a sudden they're on my home. I worry about the flooding. I've learned that a tree trunk of a tree, especially a pine tree, consumes so many gallons of water a day. I've learned more commission and more conservation stuff than I've ever in my life wanted to know. All I ever knew in my life was I love nature, I love trees, I love animals, but I have learned so much more than my brain can even handle. I worry about the trees being removed, the tree trunks being removed, the water coming across the road. Anyone that's traveled on Weathersfield Street, especially in that area of Weathersfield Street, you realize how dense it is in that area. In the broad daylight of a summer day, and then when it starts to get dusk of a summer day, you drive down through that area, and in that area, it's already dark. It's so dense. It's so dense. I worry about what's going to happen with the removal of all the trees. And supposedly they're leaving trees in some areas. And supposedly our trees are going to be there. But then how's a facility like that in such a dense area going to even receive enough sunlight to operate? Those are some of the things I worry about. I worry about, and even though people who aren't abutters are neighbors of this, that drive up and down Weathersfield Street every day, about the aesthetics of the whole thing, the beauty of it. It's going to be gone. It will no longer be there. I worry about that. And I know that seems like a simple thing to worry about. I understand that even though my home and in the area where the facility is being built is supposedly called an outlying area, I don't, whatever that term means. But let's face it, it's a residential area. It may not be called that by a zoning or by a board or whatever, but it's a residential area. It's an area where my home is. It's an area where several of these homeowners are. It's our home, and it's a residence. My home's a residence. My home may be located outlying, but it's a residence. And I feel as though it should be considered a residential area, not an area where a business is going to land. As a taxpayer of this town, I feel like that we deserve to have our homes and the value of our homes protected by the town. So basically, I'm asking for the town to try to help me. To try to help me save my home, and try to help me save the value of my home. I feel like, I've traveled around different parts of Raleigh since this has all been occurring, and I've looked at land. I've looked at the solar farm on Central Street, and I see, and I don't know who owns different lands, but I see open land everywhere. I see open land in different areas. I see open land that I feel like if this is something that Raleigh feels like they need to have, I feel like that I see other areas that it could be used for, not at the expense of a removal of all the trees and a disruption to so many people. So I guess that's all I have to say, is I'm just here for help. And thank you for listening.
Thank you. Mr. Graves, I think is.
Richard Burns, 620 Weathersfield Street.
Mr. Burns?
Could I present mine? Did a very good job. Thank you very much. Mrs. Graves. My memory's not that good, so I have to read most of it. You'll excuse me for this. I want to thank the Selectmen Board for letting us be heard about our concerns. I'm here to let the Selectmen be aware of this solar panel system will affect me, the abutters, neighbors, and community. My words will be not sanitized as that of the federal, state, and local boards have to do, and say in reference to speaking for or against the proposal of the solar panel systems. This is called a solar farm. It is a business. Webster Dictionary states the following as a business: the selling of commodities and services. The town will not call this a business. It is what it is. It is a business. The term net metering is used in selling of unused power to the power plant facility. In our state laws, there are categories of solar panel systems: small, medium, and large. This system is equivalent to 4 or 5 large solar panel systems, which will be working at 2 to 2.5 megawatts. By law, the town of Raleigh will buy back all unused power not used by the owners at retail price. How can such a large solar polar system be allowed to be undertaken in this residential area? It disrupts and damages this fragile ecosystem around us by bulldozing and digging and scraping 7 acres of earth. This all being done between all wetlands as they try to fit in as much solar panels as possible. The company working on the project said this will not cause damage to our environment. We know it will cause damage, cause great harm to our environment and wildlife in the area. It will devalue our property as a homeowner to a great extent. Who would want to buy homes looking at hundreds of these solar panels in their backyards or in front of their homes? What will happen to our town of Raleigh? This will take away the beauty of our land area for another one's profit. It becomes a stepping stone for other solar panels companies to follow. Is this the beginning of how our residential area will look like in the future? How can we allow a solar panel farm system this size be in a residential area? Please consider Mass State Law, Part 1, Title 7, Zoning, Chapter 40A, Section 3. I'm going to read this section. It's only one line I'll read out of it. No zoning ordinance or bylaw shall prohibit or unreasonably regulate the installation of solar energy systems or the building of structures that facilitate the collection of solar energy, except where necessary to protect the public's health, safety, and welfare. Because of this project, the abutters feel, as I do, the danger that this will cause of the tall trees surrounding our homes. Our trees could fall and cause serious injury or even death by cutting or topping trees for their solar panel system. The trees are a berm to protect our trees, which are in groundwater, which mine are, as well as in wetland area around my place, and protect us from the high winds, from nor'easters, because we are north and south from each other. I fear for the safety of my family. Other abutters also do. I thank you for hearing my concern. Thank you.
Yes.
I'm just going to add one thing.
Can I have your name, please?
Oh, sorry. Louise DeMella. I live on Leslie Road, and I've lived in Raleigh for 30 years. I've been very actively involved in this town. I was the president of the Raleigh Block Program for 12 years, which I did with the police department. And I've been very involved in Triton High School since my kids were there, and they're now 26 and 30 years old. The point I'd like to make is I'm here to support these people. This doesn't affect me on Leslie Road, but what it does affect is the town that I also moved to, because I didn't want to live in Saugus. I didn't want to live in a city. I wanted to go into an outlying area where there was animals and trees and beauty. I mean, Raleigh's a small town, and of course it wants to establish itself, and there's always reasons for some development. Progress is expected. But what I am gathering from what I've learned and what I've read and what I've heard is that this all occurred because someone who owns a piece of land wants to sell that land and make a profit. And that's something that Raleigh looked into, unless I'm wrong, the town of Raleigh itself, but a private owner. And I think what really needs to be taken into consideration is what do you want for the future of this town? What sort of history do we want? What sort of reputation do we want? What sort of people do you want moving here? Do you want hustle-bustle people? Do you want people who really like the town, old feel, that get involved in the school and safety areas? And I just think that's something that needs to be considered. I can't see much that the town is going to make from this if it goes forth. And I think even though the people that it does affect are obviously, as I would be too, concerned about the worth of their land, the other thing that it affects is their children and their grandchildren who may live around here, who may want to live here, and are able to do so because the changes are so drastic compared to when they were growing up with the thoughts of possibly staying here and settling. So I would just like to support that. This is a grand old town. There has been a lot of wonderful old town things that occur here, and there's always been a certain spirit. I think this is something that I'm hoping will really be very carefully considered. The process if it does go through, the process I feel needs to be changed greatly. But I'm really hoping that the reality of the situation comes forth and that the owner or one person's gain, because it is their right to do what they want with their land, is not the deciding factor, but rather what we are allowed in this sort of town. I mean, I can't build a certain number of feet from my owner's land for a reason. And I think even though this is a different project and it might be right on their land, I think it should be considered too on how it is going to affect the people who live in this town or who are loyal to this town. Amen.
Thank you. Thank you. I felt that,
If I may, sir.
Gentleman up in the back.
yes, in the back corner.
I'm Lyle Graham. I'm at 650 Weathersfield Street, around the corner from this a little bit. But I wanted to just address something that I think the town needs to think about. This is a business, and I'm a businessman. I'm with Chairman of Metaltech. The businesses sometimes aren't successful and don't do well. Electricity and energy is a commodity. It varies between 4 cents a kilowatt hour to 15 cents. Right now we have a surplus of it. 2 years from now we may not. What if these people go ahead and get this in, and all of a sudden it doesn't turn out to work as well, and they either decide to sell it, shut it down, or whatever? How does a town cope with this vast array of metal, which will corrode, oxidize, etc.? I mean, most of these panels are made in China, and they really aren't that concerned about the properties of the metal. They usually put galvanized plating on it or something like that and hope for the best. But nothing lasts 25 years. It just simply doesn't. I supply panel cloth with aluminum. We have an extrusion plant, and we have had cases out on 495 where some of these panels have already collapsed. They've only been out there for 9 years. So you don't know about snow load, salt. We know about salt. So I just wanted to say that I think whatever happens here, the town needs to protect itself. and the neighbors, so there isn't some massive financial boondoggle if this doesn't all turn up roses, and there has to be a cleanup and a reforestation and everything else, or the people just decide to flip the business. And, you know, it really is a business. So that's all I wanted. I think a bond should have to be posted or something. The idea that they're going to have goats doing all the trimming and everything, I had goats eat wires. You don't want goats around electronics and cables and hoses where water's flowing. I think, again, you need some surety as a town. You're dealing with some very big fiscal situations at Triton in the budget. Prevention is much less expensive than finding a cure. And I could easily see where this could be thousands and thousands, hundreds of thousands of dollars to clean up a big mess if they bail and just leave. That's all I have to say. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
If I may, I'm Matt Grenier from 476 Weathersfield Street. I'm quite beyond where this facility is going to be located. However, so I don't have a material investment in this. However, I do have a concern as it relates to the regulations that I've been researching. I understand that the Massachusetts Department of Energy Resource Management issued a directive in 2014 where it strongly discouraged any sort of disruption of solar panels that weren't roof-based if that disruption was going to occur in natural or forested land. From what I understand, this is natural resources that would be impacted. Coupled with that, with what Mr. Burns read, that regulation, I interpret welfare to also be inclusive of socioeconomic. And if these folks are going to lose 40% of the value of their homes, that certainly is a detriment to their welfare. So I've contacted Ms. Egan, I'm in conversations with Mr. Baker in regards to some activities that we can do as it relates to looking at the bylaw 4.4.3a, where it talks about these large solar farms, that's the end of the specificity. It doesn't define what a large solar farm is, et cetera. So,
Well, there is a definition of that term in the definition sections, and that provision you're talking about, the provision on solar farm, also incorporates the site plan review criteria, which is what the planning board is going to be applying in this case. And you should take a look at that. It does, for example, talk about detrimental impact, avoiding detrimental impact to the neighborhood and to abutters. So
okay.
it references other provisions which
So would that be sufficient to deny the applicant?
Well, again, I don't want to talk about I can't talk about the specifics of the application, but I'm just saying that's what the bylaw provides, and that's the job of the planning board to make sure that provision is enforced.
And I did share the Department of Energy Resource Management with Mr. Baker, that strong discouragement, which seemed to meet the criteria as it relates to what's being considered today.
Mm-hmm.
So thank you.
I think that various people came to me and asked for this hearing, and I felt it important enough that you had a forum to express your concerns about the solar farm. You have to understand that we operate on a series of bylaws. And as Selectman Pierce pointed out, that right now the issue is before the planning board, but also conservation has had a role in the issue, I believe. But if you want to make changes to the bylaws, you have to go through and find out what the necessary steps are. Those changes would have to be brought to us. Right now, there isn't much that we can, as a board, do. The planning board has to make a recommendation or a ruling, a decision on how this is going to work out. But right now, we can't vote, we can't do anything. We have to follow the town bylaws ourselves.
Yeah, I think, Mr. Chairman, it's obviously becoming an issue because I don't know what year the bylaw was implemented. It was probably back in the time when, probably a number of years before these so-called solar farms, or even you drive around, people have them on their houses everywhere you look. The bylaw was I don't remember. I've been a selectman off and on
Well, it
since.
was actually implemented, I can't remember the year, but I remember at the time, because I was involved in the promulgation of the bylaw, I remember at the time, we were aware that the person on Country Farms on Central Street
Yeah.
was thinking, or someone was thinking about putting a solar farm on that property, and there is one there now.
Yeah.
But the board at that time felt that it was important to get something on the books, specifically to subject those types of facilities to site plan review, and that would enable a town board, i.e. the planning board, to review the application and make sure it wasn't violating the welfare and safety of Rowley residents. So that's why we promulgated that provision. In the absence of that, they could have simply gone to the building inspector and got a permit for construction and started that facility without any input from any town board, so, or any input from, without a public hearing or any input from residents or a butter. So that's the reason behind that.
Well, I think if you look in tonight's newspaper, and there's been some recent stories, West Newbury is going through a similar process with a large-scale solar voltaic system. And they're looking at making some, I know Lipton, tonight's paper had a list of about 3 zoning changes that they would like to make to put a little more regulation as to where, how, and whatever. I think the chairman kind of said it at this point. This particular project is under the current zoning bylaw, and the planning board will make the determination when they vote as to how, what, when, where, and whatever on this particular project. I think it might be wise for this board to recommend, send a letter to the planning board and say, look, we need to take a look at what our zoning regulation is, and are there some beneficial changes that we can make to it to the town. It's not gonna help your situation at this point. That barn door that horse has left the barn already. But in future projects, I think we certainly want to be able to have some control over where they go and how they go, and obviously, I understand, I'm sure when the bylaw was passed, nobody was picturing it being in a residential area, so that's a tough sell, and if I lived in your neighborhood, I would probably be out there with you, so you're right when you say it affects you. It doesn't affect me directly, my property value, I live on the other side of town, but it affects the town as a whole, and I think it's, at this point, it's worth our while to, not much we can do with this one, it's up to the planning board to make that decision, but I think in moving forward, we can have the planning board take a look at if there, and if there are other towns around, West Newbury's in the paper tonight, I'm sure there are other communities going through the same process. This thing has kind of snuck up on us, and it's going to be gangbusters, and every year the state passes various energy credits when you do these kinds of projects, and encourages people to do it, which is fine. We need renewable energy, but we also need to be careful about where we put it and how it affects people. So I think we appreciate everybody coming in and making yourself known. We certainly have gotten any number of letters and calls and so on and so forth, but at this point, it is the planning board process, and I think our job at this point is to maybe have a motion to, send a letter to the planning board requesting that they take a look at the regulations for the spring town meeting or a fall town meeting, if we have it, to take a look at how we can change our regulations to make them better conform to the wishes of people, because I think at the time that passed, nobody was really giving it much thought. Now, all of a sudden, when it affects people, like it happens so often, when you get affected, all of a sudden, oh my goodness, I gotta go out and say something or do something, and you people are at that point right now, so.
Sir, is there any way we can accelerate as it relates to if we produce the letter as soon as tomorrow to accelerate the review? No?
I mean, the review will take its time. There's nothing we can do. It's a zoning bylaw that has to be voted on at town meeting, which will be in May, if it's ready at that time. So, like I say, at this point, the horse has left the barn. And, I wish everybody good luck. And how this turns out, we have no way of knowing, but it really is valuable that you're here. It's on television. Other townspeople will see it, and let the planning board's gonna have to make its decision and make its determination.
I'd just like to add, 12 years ago, I went on the planning board. It's my first, and the reason I went on the planning board is because I got upset with a zoning bylaw. And one of the things I discovered very quickly was about 90% of us live in the outlying. There is no residential. There is a residential, but it's very small. I think it's only about 5%. You can look this up. But we live out here, all of us, but 90% of us live in outlying, and that's something everybody needs to understand. And that's our zoning bylaws. I'm not a fan of it, but that's reality.
If I can put a plug in, we're always looking for people to get involved. We have a hard time coming up with people to run for office and get involved, and, you know, you're directly involved in your particular project, but as things move forward, we certainly welcome people to run. Nominations are open for all kinds of town offices at this point, so please get involved. We want input from everybody. We're like 5 old white guys here running the town. You know, it's really,
Speak for yourself.
there's really little diversity. We have no females. There's been females off, you know, over the time. We've had 1 or 2 here and there, but, you know, it's most of us run unopposed. And sometimes you stay just because if you don't run, nobody's going to take the position. So feel free to get involved and take out nomination papers for, it doesn't have to be the selectmen, doesn't have to be the planning board, it can be library board or, you know, some one of the smaller boards, but please, get involved, and you're seeing it here, community action and community involvement is what we all look for. Yeah, it can be a pain to us at times, because we all like to think we're right, but we want community involvement, we need that for a vibrant, viable community for everybody to enjoy, so.
This happened in my neighborhood, okay, something happened, and that's what got me involved, okay? And I said, what can I do? Okay, and I came before the Board of Selectmen, and I became the representative to the Merrimack Valley Planning Commission. That was my first position with the town. And then I ran for the planning board, I served on the planning board for 2 years, and then I made a move and ran for selectman. And here I am, okay? This is 10 years now. But, you know, this is how people get involved. It's usually, you know, a fire gets lit under you, and, you know, you become, I guess, you become a politician. And you meet a lot of people. I guess I'm trying to get people to run for office.
The thing is, too, that if you want to make changes to the town bylaws, and we encourage that, we don't make the changes. You make the changes. So you bring the changes in, have the various boards take a look at it, and then we'll vote on it at town meeting. The citizens of Rowley will make the change if they see fit. That's how the bylaw got written, that's how it was put in, that's how all of the bylaws were done.
If you're getting a general negative response to that which is being considered, is the planning board under any constraint? Or because there's not a definite, in other words, if we had a vote and people came out and voted and 60% said they didn't want this, then the planning board would know, and then my question would still be, are they under any constraint by the wishes of the town?
We're absolutely under constraint. We're under constraint of Massachusetts law. And the gentleman read actually the key provision, which is that the state law says that a town's bylaw cannot prohibit or unreasonably regulate these types of facilities. So we have to comply with that provision. We just can't take the position consistent with that law to say that these facilities are not allowed in town, or we can't impose unreasonable standards on them. So, but that same provision also says we can make sure that they don't jeopardize public health and safety. So you can see there's a fine line to be walked here. I mean,
one of the most important things I think right now is that some time, that there not be a rush for this, that even though it's been going on for a while, still make sure that everything is considered. I mean, I listened to the man, the first meeting I went to weeks ago, the people who wanted to build it. And there was a lot of stumbling over his words. There were a lot of things that were not clear. There were a lot of, oh yeah, you know, we're going to put up some blue spruce, and I'm thinking, okay, how many years will it take to cover the plant? But I mean, he seemed to have, there was a lot that wasn't definite. There was a lot that the the planning board was not happy with. And I think everyone here that it's being affected, and the rest of us who live in Raleigh, want to make sure that all those things that were questioned that night, and there were a lot, and they did not appear to be happy at all with what was being presented, that they all be realistically and honestly addressed, so that we're not rushing, they're not rushing into something to put this to rest, put this to bed. You don't want this put to bed unless it's going to be comfortable sleeping.
Well, I think you have to realize too, we have to be fair, the town has to be fair to the applicant as well as those who are in support or opposed to a project. And ultimately, at the end, if the town isn't fair, one of the parties is going to take us to court. And we spend a lot of money and a lot of time fighting court battles, which we've had in the past. So, the planning board's charge is to look at all the information, consider it all, and then make their decision. And obviously, in this situation, they're going to have to make some people happy and some people unhappy. But they have to follow the law and the dictates of the law, and we're all under that constraint. We just don't have the freedom to do whatever we want, whenever we want it as government officials. So, like I say, I think it's great that you all came in, and a lot of publicity, and I know you keep writing your letters and all those kinds of things. The people that are in favor of the project, and we encourage them to do the same thing. Make sure that all the information gets out. The planning board has all that information so they can make a reasoned and lawful decision to come in the end. In the meantime, if the law has some issues with the bylaw, has some areas that need to be improved, then it's incumbent upon us to take a look at those too, so in the future we can better deal with stuff that might not have been really paid attention to in the past. So,
Bernie?
Yeah, does anybody know the spread between the retail price and the wholesale price?
yeah. Bernie, don't even get into that. We have no idea.
No.
That's not an issue here.
Somebody had his hand? No?
All right.
Thank you all for
One-
coming.
One thing before,
Yep,
I
sorry.
throw out the figure 90%, I was sitting back, going back 10 years, about being on the planning board, I believe it was something like 82 or something like that, okay, so, because I don't want somebody calling me, Bob, you said this, and that's hard to believe, but that happens at Market Basket.
Thank you all.
Mr.
Very
Chairman,
much.
there's
Yes.
a motion on the table.
Yeah, Mr.
Motion.
I'll make a chairman that we send, I'll make a chairman. Mr. Chairman, I'll make a motion that we send a letter, to have the town administrator, if you can make it up, with your signature, to the planning board to recommend they take a look at this bylaw and see if there's some changes we can make.
Recommend some
for the
changes.
bylaw changes for the next annual town meeting.
I'm going to abstain.
Have a second?
I'll second. I'll second.
All those in favor, say aye. Aye.
Abstain.
Abstain.
So we will send a motion.
Thank you very much. Thanks for
letter
coming
to
in,
the
and,
planning board. Thank you.
Town clerk is taking out, you can get nomination papers at the town clerk's office this morning.
Good plug.
No, I'm serious, we need people to run.
Thank you for your
People that are
time.
interested, you know, it's a lot of work, but it's a lot of fun too.
No, I can't.
Yeah, Thank you.
Thank you for coming. See you soon.
See what you can do to get that bylaw in.
Will do. I'm going to write a letter tomorrow, sir.
That'd be great, so that, because we have to get the warrant together, we have to get
Understood.
things moving so that, because it's April 30th that we're gonna have town meeting, so.
Okay.
And if we can't do it in the spring.
Do what you
we can
can.
Probably have a fall town meeting.
It's a fall, yeah, it should go.
Yeah,
It's not enough
Yeah,
time.
thank you, thanks for coming.
thank you,
Bye-bye.
Thank you.
thank you.
Our turn?
I thought you were gonna put up your hand.
I did.
Oh,
I
I'm
was
sorry, I didn't
ignored.
see you.
That's okay. I did. I locked eyes on Mr. Peterson as well. It's a shame that,
Just for the record.
Bonnie Berkowitz, Weathersfield
Thank
Street,
you.
Raleigh, one of the co-applicants for the community solar project that Barbara and I have brought forth to the town. This isn't a project that, which it could be, it's our private property right, whereby we take all of the power that we need for ourselves and our farm, and then the remainder of the power goes to the town. That is not the case. That is not the designation that we work tirelessly for to receive from the Department of Energy Resources. The designation that we work tirelessly for on behalf of the town to assist so we wouldn't burden the light department for community solar, essentially we sell to the town 100% of any prospective possible energy that may be produced at the solar farm. 100% goes to the
100%.
town of Rowley. The residents benefit in a number of ways. We can table the environmental reasons. I don't want to take up any more of your valuable time. But in particular, the residents also save money in a number of ways. First of all, as we know, there's distribution charges for power. Rowley, the power that's produced in the town of Rowley currently, to my knowledge, is the power that's produced at the Central Street 0.5 megawatt solar farm. We would be contributing, we would be producing power in Rowley on our farm, 100% of which goes to the town of Rowley to distribute. Residents, because of the community solar designation, would receive the benefit of not paying for distribution for their power, which currently now,
Excuse me, I'm gonna
when-
step out of the room for a second.
when power is purchased from other places other than the Central Street solar array, there's a cost to distribute the power. So essentially, Rowley, prior to the solar array on Central Street, Rowley is a distributor of power. So the residents, as a result of the 2 megawatt that we anticipate to build on our farm, they will receive the benefit of all of that power. They will also receive a benefit of a fixed cost of their power for a minimum of 10 years. We anticipate this being a 25-year project initially with 2 20-year extensions. So there's a possibility of a 65-year renewable energy project in the town of Rowley for the residents of Rowley. So they will save that distribution cost. I know what that is. It's not for me to share that. Everyone can do their research the way they do it. And I'm sure you as the select board members have the ability and the wherewithal to do that number. I will tell you not to single out our municipality because we live here as well. The national average for distribution is 35%. So 35% of a family's or an individual's utility bill, United States average, 35% of the cost is distribution. So I know what the number is in Rowley. We know at a minimum they will save on average 35%. Okay? It's a significant savings. If we were to do the math for an average family, maybe they pay $100 a year. We can do the math. It's a significant savings for them. It's also a significant savings because I can say comfortably that electricity cost or power cost, based upon historical numbers of the past 100 plus years, they do not go down for a significant period of time. And if we were to extrapolate the data on a chart, they actually increase over time. So for a family or an individual or someone on a fixed income to have the opportunity of a 10-year fixed cost for their utility, it's a tremendous savings for them. In addition, this particular project is not costing the town of Rowley. This is a revenue project. The revenue is provided through the tax that we will pay, or whomever we will pay for the equipment that's put on to the property, in addition to some type of a mix between the farming and the commercial use, where we would also pay a difference in the residential real estate property tax. That's pure revenue to the town of Rowley year over year. There's no cost for schools, there's no cost for public safety, there's no cost for any services to the town of Rowley for this community solar project. In addition, on a personal note, or perhaps another community note, is this, we're not selling the land to anybody. There's a lot of misconceptions out there. It's unfortunate. I don't know where they came from. We're not selling the land to anyone. We're not selling the farm to anybody. Our intention is to continue to provide continuity of the farm. So this is a measure that we know for a minimum of 25 years and likely 65 years, the farm will stay in a piece, as is. That's tremendous. We have provided numerous documents to the planning board, and for some reason, perhaps there's some technological issues, but Mr. Baker said he doesn't seem to receive some of the correspondence. We have a professional forester who works with us with our forestry plan. We are a business. We have been a business. We're just like Carrick Farm and any other business. We are a business. We are a commercial business. We farm. We are allowed to timber. We could timber 25 acres of our land if we wanted to do so with our Chapter 61. We can sell our timber. We can do all of the things that we're allowed to do as a functioning farm, as we have been for many years. We're also beekeepers. So I could go on with the farming, but it's a little skewed. The forester, John Robbins, who has a master's in forestry, in addition to 35 years of experience, has provided documentation to the planning board, which I've requested in writing to Kirk and personally by phone and in person, asking him to help quell some of the concerns that our neighbors and our people in the community may have relative to what exactly goes on when trees are cut and why are trees cut. And he wrote 2 beautiful letters, and I'd be happy to share those with you if you'd like me to read them, or I can leave them with Debbie, whatever your preference is. But I'd certainly like them to be at least understood and noticed and read into some record someplace. Because Mr. Baker told me that when he receives materials, he puts them aside unless they say asked to be read into the record.
Both letters are the same?
Yeah, no, they're different, because there was a follow-up. The forester was very upset that it wasn't read into the record. He takes his work very seriously. We've paid a lot of money. We've worked with him over the years with our forestry plan. We happen to take our farm very seriously as well, and I think he knows that. So he was disappointed. Unfortunately, he's unable to attend night meetings. He cares for his elderly mother, and he cannot attend. So on his own time and effort, he did provide. I'm happy
Single
to read it.
page?
Yes, this,
Okay.
a paragraph, okay. This one was from January 30th. Dear board members, and he sent it to planning, conservation, select board, every board, assessors. I'm writing to you in support of the Rowley Solar Project on the Berkowitz Farm. Harnessing sustainable, renewable solar energy on the farm is every bit as appropriate as other sustainable farm uses, such as growing food and harvesting forest products, and all can be compatibly produced. Supporting solar energy as an alternative to non-renewable fossil fuels should now be a high priority for all communities. Having worked with many farm and forest landowners, I also know that solar energy provides an incentive to conserve their land by creating an additional renewable resource. Locally produced energy, food, and timber are all vital, sustainable uses of our farms and forest land. And it is important to remember that the productivity of the soil, which is the most important resource of all, is not altered by a solar array, and the land can always be used to grow other farm or forest products in the future. I urge your support of this worthwhile project. Thank you. Sincerely, John Robbins, Consulting Forester, Concord, Mass. And then he wrote a second letter, same all of the boards, following up on my email of January 30th in support of the Rowley Solar Project on the Berkowitz Farm. The question has come up regarding the impacts of tree cutting. Cutting trees, whether selectively harvesting timber and thinning the forest, or clearing land for farming, or harnessing renewable solar energy, has been the right of landowners throughout our history. The network of stone walls that crisscross our woodlands is evidence that most of the forest was at one time cleared for farmland because it was needed. Land use has always been based on what was needed at the time. As needs and economic conditions change, landowners must be allowed the flexibility to decide what is produced on the land. The use of the Berkowitz Farm for generating solar energy will be of great benefit to the town of Rowley and will not prevent other farm or forest uses in the future. The right to cut trees to either manage the forest or to make for another sustainable use is a necessary option for landowners in determining the best use of their land. As our long history has shown, the land and forest are extremely resilient, and there is no harm done in cutting trees for a beneficial purpose. I request that this letter be entered into the February 7th Planning Board meeting record. Thank you sincerely, John Robbins, Consulting Forester.
Could you
And-
leave copies of those for the?
Yes,
we'll put it-
certainly,
we'll
and actually.
Make it part of the record.
Yep, sure. Yeah.
We did receive emails.
Yep.
I don't know if I think I got both of those, it may,
Okay.
or something very, but we did get information
Right.
from.
So we
them.
certainly, so it's, our impetus for actually bringing this project forward is not to sell our land. It is not for us, which would be great because we could do it, is not for us to take all of our energy use first and then provide it to the town. I've grown up in the town, I realize there are a lot of people who are having tremendous difficulty at different ages. It isn't only young families, it isn't people at a middle stage, and it certainly isn't only our seniors on fixed incomes. It's been very difficult. We have 521, I believe, apartments and condominiums. I don't know how many people live in each of those. In the town of Rowley, we have 1,600 plus single-family homes. Now, we're very fortunate. We would be able to financially construct and install solar for our own particular use, for our own property, and we would know how to get our energy bill to zero. And we would also know how to actually bank it and not have to provide anything renewable other than the less carbon footprint to the town. But there are people in these apartments and condominiums and other people who, A, may not want to be involved, and B, may not have the financial capacity to do it, or they live in certain communities or types of shared housing where it just isn't allowed. And a community solar project enables those people to participate in this solar and the capped fee, whereas other types of projects, they're left behind. So we thought that that was something of tremendous value to the town. And I started the first couple of meetings where, you know, it's easy for us to fund a scholarship, and perhaps one family or two families or one person or two people may benefit. But for us, a community solar project would enable a whole bunch of people to potentially benefit. And we know, at least on a national average, and I know Raleigh is higher, that 35% of a person's bill would go away. And it's a significant amount of money. And not to mention the conservation opportunity for a farm. I'm not going to be here in 65 years, and maybe you might. You know, actuarial tables are wrong, but you know, who knows, right? You know, who knows? So it would be really nice to be able to, as some of the folks mentioned, and I've said it before. I don't know where the fear is coming from, but not for their grandchildren, but maybe their great grandchildren. Hopefully there might be a 100-acre farm left. We're trying. We're trying very, very hard to do that. We're having a number of issues, and I think someplace it got lost, but our request to the Conservation and the Planning Board initially for some consideration in the permitting process, even if it were something that was contingent, was to provide us a reservation. I use the term reservation, it's easily understandable by folks, so that we would have a reservation for the SREC 2 with the community solar. Because frankly, this project financially, and some have seen the video and perhaps sat at some of the meetings with the folks we've brought in on our team, you know, there has to be some financial viability. It's underwater. I will tell you that a community solar project is underwater for a minimum of 10 to 15 years. We have worked tremendously at the back the work we've done behind the scenes to get the very, very best teams. We brought, the first people were from Carlisle. They came with a commitment to Rowley of $200 million, right? But there was no action, or there was inadequate action on behalf of trying to work together with the permitting. For whatever reason, I'll take responsibility. We brought the project to the town, but we needed some additional help. This is a community benefit that, frankly, the town needs the revenue. There's a whole bunch of reasons that we could go on. $200 million. The first time they met with one particular board, and I think we were going through some of the challenges with maybe wages or stipends or something, they came with their checkbook and they're like, we're going to pay for all of this, and we'll get a special purpose entity for the town of Rowley. But it was like we drop off a cliff. It's like we're reaching out as the person who stood up is asking for help. It's not dissimilar in some ways. So 200 million, you could read, now they have 500 million. Well, Rowley, there's other projects to do. We do other projects. We're only doing this in this way because we live here, and it's our personal goal. But it makes no sense, it makes no sense financially. So we got another group, Sincarfa. Mr. Pierce had the opportunity to listen to one of the folks that we brought in at the last meeting. Sincarfa is one of the oldest family offices, meaning they were in textile, they were in farming. They liked Barbara's story. They liked my story. We've had solar on our farm for over 42 years. They stepped up, private money. They stepped up to work with us to get this project built. They asked at the planning board when we left, and we understand, we had changes. We had 2 changes that we were not allowed or given the opportunity to present to the board that night.
Well, I don't,
Well, it doesn't matter. It's okay.
frankly, I
Here
don't know
we
what
are.
you're talking about.
It's okay, as far as just minor, trying to address the third-party reviewer. It's okay, here we are, we're moving forward. But he asked during the meeting, what would it take to satisfy so that we can get to permit or provisional?
I don't think we want to get into the
Well,
details
no,
of the
well,
permitting. I mean,
but-
that's not a purview that we have. I think
Understood.
you've been allowed to speak
Could you please,
at quite a length.
Oh, okay.
we've been going on for some time, and
Okay.
could you wind it up?
The only other thing I was going to say is the other concern was that when they reviewed in their due diligence, they brought up the fact, or they brought up testimony that the town is the possibility of the town going bankrupt.
That's not,
Well, as an investor,
that's not the issue before the planning board, I'm sure, with the
no,
the
it's just,
financial situation.
no, it's just for an investor who's
Yeah, I
coming
mean,
into
it's what the zoning
town of
bylaw
Raleigh.
reads and how the planning board's going to interpret that, and that's,
No,
no, I understand, but,
that's all it is. It's just banking.
no, thank you very much.
Thank you for your
Thank you.
time.
Thank you.
Bob? I don't think he heard me.
He may have gone to sleep.
You coming?
Bob? He's outside.
Bob Snow?
Okay, I got the door closed.
Okay. We'll go on with the agenda. We're up to old business number 4, an update on the Annex Elevator Project. Debbie and Dave have been working on the Annex Elevator Project. We've asked CBI to present a phase-in approach due to the high cost in making the building handicap accessible. The state requires the entire building be upgraded as part of this project. The estimated cost is well above the amount available. Debbie and Dave are recommending that the available funds be used for upgrading the first floor of the building at this point.
Okay, just briefly, not to get long-winded on this, but the original elevator project that we got money for and had hired an engineer for, we were hoping it was going to be around $800,000 for the total cost of the project. Well, what we since found out is, yeah, we can get the elevator for something close to $800,000, but because we're changing over 30% of the value of the building, we have to make it completely handicapped accessible from the first and second floors. That includes such things as a bathroom on the second floor, all the doorways, all the stairwells, the elevator itself. And the bottom line was the total project came to us at about $1.8 million, which obviously we don't have. We would like to make that building as handicapped accessible as possible. In the meantime, we possibly may get the Didax building, which we could then move town offices out of that building. And that would negate the need for a second floor. However, the intent would be to keep the Council on Aging on the first floor, and they could actually have probably the entire first floor with maybe a meeting room, a dual-purpose room for a meeting room plus used by the council. So Debbie and I, in discussing the project with the architect, went back to him and says, look, we're not gonna have the money to, I'm not gonna have $1.8 million anytime in the near future. How about if you divide the project into 3 phases? The first floor, which would include the rebuilding of the handicap ramp, because without the elevator, you need the ramp, and that ramp is not up to standards for handicapped access. The second proposal would be the second floor. which would
Second
include
phase, you mean?
Yeah, second
Yeah.
phase would be the second floor. Third phase would be at the end, the actual construction of the elevator if we get to that point. And the idea being that we really need the first floor to be renovated and made handicap accessible for the number of elderly that go over there for the Council on Aging. And our intent is to keep the building, barring some unforeseen circumstances, we're intending to keep the building for that use. So we're recommending, Debbie and I, recommending that we ask the CPC for if you look on your, you guys have a copy of this, on the second page, the first approach is the one specifically requesting breaking the work apart by floor. This includes taking a piecemeal approach to the stair work and doing one toilet room renovation at a time. So the first phase would basically be a construction cost of $181,000 rounded off, with a total cost of $212,000 rounded off. So that would totally handicap access the first floor along with the access to the building. And we feel that that's money well spent. The building badly needs renovation work anyway. The bathroom is really not in great condition over there. The ramp needs to be replaced at a minimum, and that way the doors will be replaced. The whole place will be brought up to the latest handicapped access code. So we're asking for the board to vote, and we don't need to vote tonight necessarily, but think about it, read through the information that you've been presented. We'd be looking for probably $220,000 to give us a little bit of leeway for increased costs at the annual town meeting from the CPC to do that renovation project. We've already used $100 and something thousand for the architectural plans. Out of this money that we've got, we will have specs and everything else, so that if we appropriate the money, the company, CBI, is doing the specs, will handle the bidding, and so on and so forth, so that it's a project that we've already invested in, and unknowns to us that we would have to do so much renovations to make the building totally handicapped. And we're just keeping our fingers crossed, actually, that we get Didax, so that we do the first floor. That'll be the extent. We'll never have to actually put an elevator in. So keep in mind that we're looking for, say, $220,000 to do that.
I'm at the annex frequently, and I consider the front door to be the door on Central Street, and the back door in the parking lot. And that back door just does not close.
Yeah, no,
And even with the sign, you can't, it's very difficult. And having that door ajar, it really lets that cold air come through the building.
Yeah,
It's very
we need
difficult.
the ramps, we
do
need the bathroom is
renovations.
decrepit over there, the doorways are not wide enough. We really, anybody in a wheelchair, the building's accessible, but barely accessible.
Yeah.
And there are a number of people that come in there, the elderly, that come in for the Monday meal that, have wheelchairs and things like that, so. My feeling is, and I believe Debbie feels the same way, it's money well spent. And it's something that, one of those infrastructure projects that we really need to do.
Sure.
Because the other thing is, it's a historic building. And my feeling is that if we don't have the Council on Aging, or we don't want to abandon that building, because once you don't use it for anything, it's gonna fall apart very quickly. Whereas if we make the proper renovations to the first floor, and, the second floor can be used for storage or anything else that the public doesn't have access to.
Right.
But it's space that we really need, and, I've talked with the Council on Aging Director over there, I've explained the situation to her, and she's very much supportive of this project going forward if we vote for it, so. And it is CPC, as near as we can tell, they have sufficient funds to cover this, so hopefully the CPC committee will continue to support that project, which they have up to this point with the money for the architect and the money we spent already, so.
Thank you. Okay. We have new business. Discuss capital projects. Debbie has identified the following capital projects for the Board of Selectmen. Completion of the town window replacement project, Selectmen's office floors, handicap ramps, fire alarm and security systems for municipal buildings. Town hall window replacement, we have replaced all the town hall windows under this project, with the exception of 5 windows in the Selectmen's office. These are the original windows, and they are drafty. Debbie's office and the personnel office don't have radiators and access to the building's heating system. So if this final set of windows can be replaced, it would assist in keeping these areas warm during the cold months. The project budget has a balance of $1,663. Debbie is asking permission to file an application with the Community Preservation Committee for funds to complete the project and then place an article on the town meeting warrant. The Selectmen's office floors. More than 10 years ago, area rugs were placed over various sections of the carpet in the Selectmen's office. The existing carpet is more than 40 years old. There are tears, holes in the carpet, and is posing a safety hazard. Also, the area rugs are getting loosened and are posing a tripping hazard. Debbie is asking permission to go forward and get price options for replacing flooring and an article for the town meeting warrant.
Keep in mind, Mr. Chairman, that the rest of the floors in this building were done 2 or 3 years ago. The halls, the other offices, the only one that
Right,
wasn't
they
done
were.
was the Selectmen's office. We're saying 40 years, I think was probably a lot older than that.
And the handicap ramps, the ramps at both buildings need to be replaced. Debbie is asking permission to get prices for the replacement of the ramps in anticipation of getting funding at town meeting. The annex ramp is part of the annex elevator project, as we just heard from Selectman Peterson. Fire alarm and security system. We've met with Fire Chief Jim Broderick on the fire alarm system. As part of the fire alarm system upgrade, we're also including the security system. Debbie is seeking permission to go forward with drafting an article for funding this item. Do you want a vote on each?
Mr. Chairman, I'm looking for some direction. These would be your capital items, the projects that we're working on
Right.
directly for the Board of Selectmen. So if there's an indication of the board wanting to proceed with this,
Maybe if you could give us an indication of if you support or don't support these, and then we'll come forward with a more definitive prices if the board feels these are appropriate. But the handicap ramp for this building, hopefully we can get CPC money for that, because it's a handicapped access for a historic building, so we're hoping we can do that.
Bob? Do you
Windows
support?
drafty, yes, I've been in here, you hear the windows rattle.
All these projects, it's the same thing that we talk about every day. Infrastructure has been allowed to, so this year here, I don't think we got any requests for vehicles, which was surprising.
Yeah.
And it's a chance to, as every year we get to a bond for some of these projects, and this is an ideal year to get a few of these things done and out of the way, so that we can, next year will probably be a vehicle or two on the budget request, so take advantage while we can.
Cliff?
Well, they all seem reasonable.
Bob?
Yeah, I mean, we definitely need to get the windows done. We've known that for quite a while. And we
Yep.
did get the vast majority of it, but
Right.
we kind of ran out at the very end, so to do 5 more windows and we'll be in good shape.
I would say we're in support of the issues.
Okay, we'll come in with better prices and whatever Debbie will put together, or the town administrator will put together the articles.
Thank you.
He really needs
And we'll be going and we'll talk about look over that stuff for the annex first floor, maybe next meeting we can get permission to go ahead, and we'll request to go before the CPC committee for funding for the couple of projects that involve their money.
It's hard to believe that this is February 12th, and town meeting is April 30th, and it's coming up on us real quick. I keep reminding people that the Pine Grove School renovation project starts April 16th, so yeah, there's a lot happening. Okay, fiscal year 19 budgets. We are in budget season. We have the town hall and an annex copier. We have the budget for town council. We have handicap commission disability and Memorial Day and Veterans Day. The town hall annex copier budget is not ready for tonight. The other three budgets are ready. Debbie has level funded them. She is suggesting a name change to the handicap commission to ADA/disability budget because there is no handicap commission. The ADA coordinator, Debbie, with the assistance of Natalie, work on the ADA items for the town. Thank you both.
Give you a motion, Mr. Chairman, to approve the town council, the ADA disability budget with that name change, and Memorial and Veterans Day.
I'll second that.
It's level funded.
Second that.
We're doing the handicap, right? Just the handicap?
I think we did.
Or do you want to do all three?
We can do all three together, right?
Okay, I just wanted to be clear.
Yeah, it's
Yeah.
all three, town
I just
council,
wanted to
handicap
clarify.
commission, disability,
And town council.
And
town council,
And I'll
Memorial,
second
and Veterans Day.
You second?
Yeah.
Any discussion? I like the 0%. All those in favor of approving the budgets for fiscal 19, the ones, town council and the handicap, the ADA, and the Memorial Veterans Day?
Aye.
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 Just keep in mind that in the future, if we have to cut back, we may have to reduce some of these budgets, but that'll come at a later time.
Bernie?
Yeah, for the record, is it possible to just read what the level funded amounts would be on these items? For the school board, I'm insistent on doing that because
The handicapped is $190 request for
Aren't they on the
FY19.
sheet?
It's everything that's in fiscal 18, so it's all level funded.
The town council, board of selectmen, is a total of $114,000. And the Memorial Day, Veterans Day is $1,800. Those are all level funded.
thank you.
Yep, they're right there. Okay, thank you, David. Mr. Peterson. Announcements. The Friends of the Council on Aging is sponsoring a shoe drive during the month of April at the Town Hall Annex, 39 Central Street. Paired footwear, such as the following, may be deposited in the container at the Annex parking lot. Shoes, boots, work boots, sandals, slippers, flip-flops, heels, sneakers, pocketbooks, purses, backpacks, and belts. Information on the Pine Grove School project is available on the town's website at www.townofraleigh.net. The town meeting is scheduled for Monday, April 30th, 2018, at 7 p.m. in the Pine Grove School Gymnasium. Please note, it is in the gymnasium this year. The treasurer-collector announces that the motor vehicle excise tax bills were mailed on February 2nd, 2018. The town has the following vacancies: Vince Viewer, 3 positions; Wood Lumber and Bark Inspector; Zoning Board of Appeals Associate, 3 seats; Parks and Recreation Committee, 1 seat; and Deputy Shellfish Constables, 2 positions. For more information on these positions, please contact the Selectman's Office at 948-2372. The Rowley Food Pantry is in need of donations. Donations can be left at the Rowley Public Library. The food pantry is opened on Tuesdays from 10 a.m. to 12 p.m. and on Thursdays from 5:30 p.m. to 7 p.m.
Give you a motion to adjourn, Mr. Chairman.
Second.
Motion has been made and seconded to adjourn. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Thank you very much.